It is now 8:30. If you please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Oh, well, we'd like to wish you all a very sunny good morning and thank you for being here. We'd also like to thank those out in Zoom land. Our first order of business is a public hearing on the adoption of ordinance 24-1. We'll start out with Megan has a few comments to make.
Good morning. It's February 13th, 2024. Staff report to the Board of Supervisors regarding ordinance 24-1 regarding hazardous liquid pipelines.
Megan, could you get closer to the mic, please?
On January 15th, 2024, the Planning and Zoning Commission voted 5-1, with one choosing to abstain from the vote to recommend approval to the proposed ordinance. The ordinance also includes text amendments to the Dickinson County Zoning Ordinance 102. At the direction of the chair, I will read ordinance 24-1. An ordinance amending various sections of the zoning ordinance of Dickinson County, Iowa, ordinance 102, for the purpose of regulating and restricting the use of land in the county for the transport of hazardous liquid through a hazardous liquid pipeline. Whereas the supervisors of Dickinson County, the county, under the authority of Iowa Construction Art 3-39A, Iowa Code 331.301 and Iowa Code 335.3, adopted and made effective as September 1st, 1998, Ordinance 102 pertaining to county zoning and land use controls, the ordinance. And whereas the county may by ordinance lawfully regulate and restrict the use of land for trade, industry, residence, or other purposes in accordance with the comprehensive plan and designed to further the considerations and objectives set forth in Iowa Code 335.5. And whereas the county updated its comprehensive plan in 2006, and the update stated that the following overall goal was the most significant element underlying the comprehensive plan to provide long-term planning, growth, and balanced developments, which together with land use controls will minimize the number of conflicting land uses, consider the impact on the natural environment, and preserve the character and intent of urban and rural developments. The county shall recognize and achieve a sensitive balance between urban and rural land uses, which facilitate the economic potential of the county, while at the same time preserving sensitive environmental resources of the region and facilitating necessary and required services to the residents of the county. And whereas the comprehensive plan also sets forth the following: 1, master land use plan; 2, goals and objectives for land use planning, agricultural land and farming operations, residential development, commercial development, industrial trade, transportation, natural resources, and environment, public facilities and services, conservation and recreation, and historical and cultural preservation. And 3, an implementation plan for achieving the goals of the plan. And whereas the comprehensive plan states, among further things, that the county's land use goals are: 1, with regard to physical setting, quote, future developments should be scrutinized for potential effects it may have upon the physical setting and natural resources of the county. 2, with regard to agricultural lands, the soils of the county are, quote, extremely valuable and non-renewable natural resource, and that must be protected from, quote, soil erosion, soil manipulation, and soil contamination. And furthermore, that the land should be considered for development if the proposed amendment will not be detrimental to other existing developments or nearby sensitive natural resource areas. 3, with regard to the county development, overall development of the county stagnant. At a minimum, existing businesses and housing should be maintained and encouraged to expand. One primary objective for the countywide development involves focus on increasing the county's existing tax base through the promotion of new opportunities, new development, especially those related to the tourism and recreational nature of the county, should be encouraged in order to strengthen and promote the continued economic viability of Dickinson County. 4, with regard to city development, city growth in Dickinson County must be encouraged in order to strengthen the overall community, economic, and tourism vitality. 5, with regard to the residential development, adequate space for future residential development must be maintained if the county will continue to grow. 6, with regard to industrial development, hazardous industrial uses, i.e. farm or agricultural chemicals, along with those industries promoting the harnessing or production of natural energy sources should be considered upon careful review and consideration to locate in agricultural zoned areas where zoning protection can be implemented to keep residential uses at a safe distance. And 7, with respect to land use mixing, zoning practices should allow a separation of land use types in order to give all uses protection from incompatible types. And whereas the county's comprehensive plan establishes a set of land use policies for agricultural land that includes the following principle. Quote, to prevent the proliferation of non-agricultural land uses through predominantly rural sectors of the county. Whereas the consideration and objectives of the land use and zoning regulations adopted under Iowa Code 335.5 require counties to design the regulation 1 to secure safety from fire, flood, panic, and other dangers. 2, to protect health and the general welfare. 3, to facilitate the adequate provision of transportation, water, sewage, schools, parks, and other public requirement. And whereas the county and several municipalities within the county employ a number of emergency response personnel, including local sheriff, police, firefighters, and emergency medical service responders, and are responsible for ensuring the safety of these public servants through adequate training, knowledge, and access to personal protective equipment. And whereas the state of Iowa, through Iowa Code Chapter 29C, requires the county and the several cities within the county to participate in and fund county level and regional emergency response planning for both natural and human caused disasters through its joint county municipal local emergency management commission and agency to support response to disasters in Iowa counties and to establish emergency communication measures to alert county residents of threats to their lives and well-being. And whereas the county has authority under Iowa law to require information from the company that proposes to construct a hazardous liquid pipeline in the county that will enable the county to fulfill its statutory required emergency planning duties and protect county emergency personnel, response personnel. And whereas the county, in coordination with the state of Iowa, other counties, and several cities within the county, has adopted a comprehensive emergency management plan in order to provide for a coordinated response to a disaster and emergency in Dickinson County. And whereas the existing emergency response plan for the county does not currently evaluate the risk or the plan for the county's response to the rupture of a carbon dioxide pipeline passing through the county. And whereas the transport of hazardous liquid through a hazardous liquid pipeline constitutes a threat to the public health and the general welfare, such that the Pipeline and Hazardous Materials Safety Administration of the United States Department of Transportation, PHMSA, has the authority to prescribe safety standards for such pipelines. And whereas the Federal Pipeline Safety Act in 49 USC 6010 authorizes the United States Department of Transportation to regulate safety standards for the design, construction, operation, and maintenance of the hazardous liquid pipelines, including those that transport supercritical carbon dioxide. But 60104E of this law provides that this chapter does not authorize the Secretary of Transportation to prescribe the location or routing of a pipeline facility, such that no federal regulation determines the location or route of a hazardous liquid pipeline. Therefore, the state of Iowa and its municipalities may determine the route or location of a federally regulated hazardous liquid pipeline based on such policy factors that the state of Iowa deems relevant. And whereas the state of Iowa and its political subdivisions may and must consider the risk to present and future land uses of hazardous liquid pipeline when selecting a route for it, so as to prevent its construction overly near a residential building, existing and future public and private infrastructure, high and vulnerable population buildings such as schools and nursing homes, future housing or industrial developments, and confined animal feeding facilities. And whereas in Iowa, the Iowa Utilities Board, the IUB, has authority pursuant to 49 USC 60104E of the Hazardous Liquid Pipeline Safety Act under the Iowa Code Chapter 479B to implement certain controls over hazardous liquid pipelines, including the authority to approve the location and routing of hazardous liquid pipelines prior to its construction. And whereas under Iowa Code 479B4, a pipeline company must file a verified petition with the IUB asking for a permit to construct, maintain, and operate a new pipeline along, over, or across a public or private highways, grounds, waters, and streams of any kind in the state. And whereas Iowa Code 479B5 requires that each petition for a permit must state the relationship of the proposed project to the present and future land use and zoning ordinances. And whereas Iowa Code 479B21 specifically provides for the application of provisions for protecting or restoring property that are different than the provisions of Section 479B20 and the administrative rules adopted thereunder. If those alternative provisions are contained in agreements independently executed by the pipeline company and the landowner, too, specifically contemplates that such agreements will pertain to the line location, and 3, specifically requires the independent agreement on the line location between the landowner and the pipeline company must be provided in writing to the county. And whereas the use of land for a hazardous liquid pipeline constitutes constitutes a use of land for trade, industry, or other purposes which the county has not heretofore specifically regulated or restricted through the use of zoning or other ordinances, but which constitutes an industrial use of the land that is not currently permitted use in any of the county's zoning districts, and which currently requires an addition to the zoning ordinance according to the county's amended procedures. And whereas Summit Carbon Solutions LLC Summit has submitted to the IUB a petition for a hazardous liquid pipeline permit, the permit, and proposes to build a carbon capture and sequestration project that would transport up to 12 million metric tons of carbon dioxide CO2 annually from participating industrial facilities in Iowa, as well as CO2 from facilities in Minnesota, North Dakota, South Dakota, and Nebraska, to a sequestration site in North Dakota where CO2 will be permanently stored. And whereas IUB has not yet issued a permit to Summit, and whereas there are several factors that would influence human health and public welfare in the event of a rupture of such pipeline, including CO2 parts per million, ppm concentration, wind speed and direction, velocity of the gas exiting the pipe, in the thermodynamic variables. And whereas 1, a sudden rupture of CO2 pipeline may lead to asphyxiation of nearby people and animals. 2, CO2 is lethal if inhaled for 10 minutes at a concentration larger than 10% by volume. 3, the National Institute for Occupational Safety and Safety and Health, NIOSH, has set the immediate dangers of life and health, IDLH, limit of CO2 at 4% by volume, and the 4, the concentration of 20% volume CO2 is lethal to humans within 1 minute. And whereas the rupture of a carbon dioxide pipeline in the county would likely release large amounts of carbon dioxide that would rise to dangerous levels near the rupture that could threaten the health and lives of county residents, emergency response personnel, and animals, including but not limited to valuable livestock and confined animal feeding facilities. And whereas a rupture of a carbon dioxide pipeline near a populated area could cause a mass casualty event. And whereas on May 26, 2022, PHMSA announced new safety measures to protect Americans from carbon dioxide pipelines failures, including 1, initiating a new rulemaking to update standards for CO2 pipelines, including requirements related to emergency preparedness and response. 2, issuing an advisory bulletin to remind owners and operators of gas and hazardous liquid pipelines, particularly those of facilities located on shore or in inland waters, about the serious safety-related issues that can result from the movement and other geological hazards. And 3, conducting research solicitations to strengthen pipeline safety of the CO2 pipeline. And whereas the rulemaking initiated by PHMSA to update safety and emergency preparedness standards for CO2 pipelines is not yet complete, and whereas IUB does not have jurisdiction over emergency response in Iowa and has no expertise in emergency response planning, and whereas the county does not have access to scientific assessments for the area of risk that would result from a rupture from carbon dioxide pipeline proposed to be constructed in the county, which can be estimated through the use of computer modeling, and whereas the county seeks to require the preparation of an estimate of the hazardous zone resulting from the rupture of carbon dioxide pipeline proposed to pass through the county for the purpose of planning the county's emergency response and of facilitating the least dangerous route through the county. And whereas the county may adopt land use and zoning restrictions, 1, for the purposes of regulating the land use in the county, including the execution of independent agreements between landowners and pipeline companies regarding line location, and 2, for the purposes of planning the county's emergency response and of facilitating the least dangerous route through the county of a hazardous liquid pipeline, including requiring the submission of an emergency response and hazard mitigation plan. And whereas the adoption of such land use and zoning regulations is 1, consistent with and not preempted by Iowa Code Chapter 479B, including Iowa Code 479B.57 and 479B20, and 2, necessary to facilitate the IUB's approval of the permit in whole or in part upon terms, conditions, and restrictions as location and route that are just improper. And whereas the county intends to establish a process under the ordinance for permitting and approving the use of land in Dickinson County for the transport of hazardous liquid through a hazardous liquid pipeline that is not inconsistent with or preempted by federal law, including the Hazardous Liquid Pipeline Safety Act at 49 USC 60101, and is not consistent with preempted by Iowa law, including Iowa Code Chapters 479B, 331, and 335. Whereas the County Planning and Zoning Commission held a public hearing on the proposed ordinance on January 15th, 2024, and on that same date recommended approval of the ordinance. Specifically on the agenda, so that is the ordinance 24-1. And then there are a series of items underneath this, which would be the discussion and action of the text amendments to our zoning ordinance. With permission, I would go through all of those as a package, and then should you wish to act on those individually.
Okay, so you will be going over the
The text
totality and then the vote will be separately.
Yes.
Okay,
So section 1, text amendment, article 3, definitions, use, classification, section 1 of the zoning ordinance is amended by adding the following new definition of public notice and before the definition of public way. So the definition is actually public utility. Means a public utility is defined in section 476.1 and shall also include waterworks, municipality, owned waterworks, joint water utilities, rural water districts incorporated under Iowa Code Chapter 357A or Chapter 504, cooperative water associations, and electronic transmission owners as defined in Iowa Code Section 476.27, primarily providing service to public utilities as defined in Iowa Code Section 476.1. The next one will also be a text amendment to the general classifications of Article 3, and this will be under the description of industrial use types. So the hazardous liquid pipeline is a use of land for purposes of transporting hazardous liquid through a hazardous liquid pipeline. For the purposes of the zoning ordinance, hazardous liquid and hazardous liquid pipeline shall have the meaning defined in Article 36. Section 3, an additional text amendment, definitions, use, classification, paragraph D, which would be the general description of civic use types, subsection or subparagraph 17. The local utility services definition is amended as follows. Local utility services such as public utilities, which are necessary to support principal development and which involve only minor structures such as lines, poles, transformers, control devices, and junction boxes, which are necessary to support principal development. Local utility services does not include a hazardous liquid pipeline nor facilities and infrastructure that do not serve either retail customers or public utilities that serve retail customers. Section 4, text amendment, Article 4, districts. The general regulations is amended by adding a new paragraph F. No person or property owner shall use land in any area or district in the county for purposes of transporting hazardous liquid through a hazardous liquid pipeline, except under the conditions and restrictions provided herein in Article 36, hazardous liquid pipelines. For the purposes of the zoning ordinance, hazardous liquid and hazardous liquid pipeline shall have the same meaning defined in Article 36. Following. Section 5, text amendment, Article 5, agricultural district, which is the A1 district, conditional principal uses, adding letter D, under letter D, industrial uses is amended by adding hazardous liquid pipelines as a use in that district. You will see section 6, which is also a text amendment in Article 21, conditional uses. That will be addressed at the 10 o'clock hour when we are addressing conditional uses. So that is not an action to be taken at this time. The last one is the following text amendment. The zoning ordinance is amending by adding the following new Article 36 to the zoning ordinance, which has been published on the website and have been available for copies. So I will not read through Article 36 in its entirety.
okay. I imagine we should discuss these in order. So you put up Article 3 definition.
Would you like to begin with correspondence?
That would be all right too.
Okay. I have one item of correspondence for the hazardous liquid pipeline. And then could you? Dickinson County Board of Supervisors. Enclosed are some reference articles primarily dealing with the proposed pipeline. My views are those reflected in the Radke report. To that, I will add that it would be one of the greatest crimes to allow a private corporation to have the authority to use eminent domain for carbon capture pipelines. Add to that the millions of gallons of water it would take to cool the CO2 when it is compressed to be able to send it into a pipeline. Also, the impact on the land digging in hundreds of miles of pipe solely for the profits of one or more of these private corporations. This issue affects everyone directly by the taking of land or using your tax money to pay for it. Do what you can to stop it. Another issue is to stop allowing foreign companies to buy land. And that says, see the last sheet. And then his name was Mike Hezidis. That is all I have for you at this moment.
That's all you have to do.
Do you want to listen to speakers or do you want to go through this?
They should public input and then discussion as typically.
So, I can call 3 people at a time
Well,
and have
why
them.
don't we ask first if there's anyone that has anything to say about the zoning Article 3 definitions?
I think they were probably going to speak as a whole, is like in regards to the pipeline.
Just what you read under
Yep.
definitions.
Okay,
So do you want to have them speak as a whole first? And then you guys could discuss Article 3,
Yeah,
you guys discuss and then put it to the,
Right.
to the members? So have these people
Well-
speak as a whole
no, let's do it.
during the public hearing though, before you go
Right.
into the actionable items?
Yes,
So have these people speak as a whole for the actionable, or before the actionable items?
yes.
Okay.
That'd be okay.
Okay.
Now, but first, do we have any legal representation that is for the pipeline? Do we have any legal representation that is anti-pipeline that would like to speak at this time? All right, amazing. Start us off. And Jordan, try and keep about 2 or 3 people
Yep.
ready.
So Dennis Jackson, Dan Torson, and Vince Davis, if you'd like to get in line. Dennis Jackson is first. Hey, Denny.
And Danny, get your mouth nice and close to the microphone. 'cause
And
if
I'll
you
try and
talk
take
over
not
here-
quite as long as Megan did.
So just an, just an FYI that each speaker will be limited to 3 minutes and it will be timed.
Okay, we Dickinson County landowners appreciate you and the zoning board addressing this issue in a timely fashion. It is a good plan addressing the issue of land use if such infrastructure should come into Dickinson County. I would urge you to approve the ordinance.
Good morning. My name's Dan Torson. I'm the grain merchandiser at Green Plains in Superior. I've been in the ethanol business for roughly 5 years and all that time at this plant in Superior. I was born and raised in Grettinger and currently live there today. I've seen how what we do touches the lives right here in Dickinson County. Our plant is not only just a workplace, it's a community hub. We provide jobs, support local businesses, and help keep our local economy strong. We purchase approximately 22 million bushels of corn a year from Dickinson and other area farmers. I'm here to talk to you about the ordinance being considered and how it could really put us in a tough spot. The proposed setback would stop our plant from connecting to the CO2 we need. And this connection is crucial for us to keep doing what we do and what we do best and remain a strong market for area farmers. Our partnership with Summit Carbon Solutions is about making sure we can keep up with changing market demands. This is about staying competitive and keeping jobs and local corn demand right here in Dickinson County. The pipeline is our ticket to making sure we can sell our ethanol to more places, keeping us in business for the long haul. There is global demand for low carbon fuels, and Summit Carbon Solutions' proposed pipeline is the most effective way for us to dramatically decrease our emissions and gain access to those markets. I've been in the ag industry for 30 years. I've seen a lot of changes in the market and how it can impact operations like ours. When we have a chance to open up new opportunities, we must take it. This pipeline connection is one of those chances. It's about making sure we can keep providing good jobs, supporting our families, and contributing to our farming community. It's about making sure Dickinson County and the area's corn farmers are in the forefront of markets using American-made fuels to lower carbon footprints across multiple industries. So I'm asking Dickinson County Board of Supervisors to think carefully about this ordinance and not pass something that hurts agriculture. Keeping our plant competitive and connected isn't just good for us, it's good for the whole community. It's about keeping jobs here, supporting our local economy, and making sure Dickinson County stays a great place to live and work. Thank you for listening. I believe we can work together on this for the good of our community.
Thank you.
Scott O'Rourke, Vicky Beck, and Barb Clayton are after Vince.
I'm Vince Davis, and for full disclosure, I do live in Spirit Lake and am a director on the Little Sioux Corn Processors Board in Marcus, Iowa. First of all, I have some questions about from the board. There are some misleading things within the ordinance. Discrepancy that I see is on page 16 under the animal husbandry. It says a map and legal description of the proposed route for carbon dioxide pipeline showing all human occupied structures and human animal husbandry facilities by type within 2 miles of the center line and proposed route including addresses. In one page on page 13, it says separation distance from an animal husbandry would be 1,000 feet, and another one says 2 miles. So I want to ask a question that, you know, are we to clean this up? Another one is on page 17, where it may be a typo, where it says lead. I believe it probably means leak, but all this needs to be cleaned up, and without a clean ordinance, I oppose the ordinance at this time until it is cleaned up, and we need to get that taken care of before it is passed. Thank you.
Thank you. Who?
Good morning, everybody. I'm Scott O'Connick with Summit Carbon Solutions. I come from South Haven, Minnesota. And I have one proposal for you, the board. But before I get to that, I want to speak to safety and what safety means for this pipeline. Safety is priority one. Without safety, we will not get a permit. We cannot operate. If this would go into operation and we could not perform safely, like we have testified at the IUB, we've said in front of you, we've presented in front of you, this pipeline would be shut down. It would be inactive. You can look at the history, you know, over 50 years, there's CO2, like 5,300 miles of CO2 pipelines currently, you know, working safely. Also, the opportunities that the ethanol industries, I don't know if everybody's, the latest news since I've talked to you about the Georgia SAF plant, that's Sustainable Aviation Fuel plant, and it's called LanzaJet, and I urge everybody to look it up, is the world's first alcohol to jet biorefinery that will use low ethanol to make a drop in for jet fuel. While they say their goal is to use Midwestern ethanol within the United States, they have also received federal approval to use sugarcane ethanol produced in Brazil. Without access to the Southern Carbon Solutions pipeline, which will significantly reduce the CI score of ethanol by as much as 30 points, the ethanol we produce will not qualify for SAF. Therefore, we are missing out on a huge market and opportunity. The reality of this ordinance and the unconnectability for the Superior plant, because it's within the city footprint, is unrealistic. This project also, the main line, this is a line that connects to the main line. and is going, when that main line happens, and this ordinance will actually slow this plant, this in Dickinson County, from actually being connected to a plant. And then those plants that are connected to this have new market opportunities and continue to sell into these green markets that continue to change, continue to develop. And it's really putting a lot of pressure on your local plant in Dickinson County. My request to you guys today is to table this today. Bring it up again at a more appropriate time. Right now, we have in the Southern District with Judge's Rose ruling that the ordinances that were set forth are not viable. They cannot be enforced.
Time's up. I'm sorry. Thank you.
Yep. Thank you.
Hi, Vicky Beck, Spirit Lake. I want to thank you for getting this together, and I think you should proceed with voting on the ordinance that you have in place. There is a couple things that I am wondering about, that you address the pipeline as Summit. I'm wondering if it should be any pipelines, because we do not want to have to do this again when the next fly-by-night party comes in and wants to cross our county with hazardous pipelines. And they will come if they get this. And the other thing is eminent domain. It is just totally should not be in this project, because this is a private company. And when Scott talks about they talk about how the ethanol plant's going to benefit down here. Well, ethanol down here would benefit way better if Bruce Rastetter would quit competing with us in Brazil. So he's in Brazil producing all this carbon and ethanol and jet fuel, and he's the owner here and wants to be the owner of the ethanol here. That's pretty much a monopoly if I look at it right, that he's getting paid in the US, he's getting paid in Brazil. We're not getting paid. We may get a few cents to keep going to the ethanol plant. And I have always heard, my brother-in-law worked for Pioneer, and he always says, corn is always going to be cost of production. Somebody else is going to take the profit. The Green Plains is going to take the profit. Summit's going to take the profit. It's never coming back to the farmer. Our prices get higher, our inputs get higher. So please stop this where you're at. And the other thing I don't think anybody is talking about is the amount of water that it's going to take for each of these 50 ethanol plants to do their sequestration. From what we've been reading, each plant could take up to 500 million gallons of water every year for 50 plants. Now, we're in a struggle right now with drought, and I think you need to stop something somewhere, and this is a good place to start. You can come back and revise it if you need to, but you're also protecting 70% of us that don't have a voice in this. Thank you.
Thank you, Vicky.
After Barb, we have Steve. I'm not going to pronounce your last name because I don't want to say it incorrectly, because I already did yours. I'm sorry, Scott. And then Al. I don't know the last name. And Steve Anderson after that.
Hi, everyone. Barb Clayton from Spirit Lake. And, I think for the most part, this ordinance hits where we need it to hit. One of the things we do have to remember, like Vicky said, that Bruce Rastetter is on both sides of this. He's built 6 plants in Brazil. He also has this
Barb, could I please stop you? Would someone start the timer?
Oh,
Thank you.
okay. So he has this sustainable aviation fuel in the south. He has that also, and then he's trying to build this pipeline. So he's putting billions of gallons of ethanol on the market in Brazil, and supposedly that doesn't compete. with what we're seeing here locally. So he's on both sides of this issue. There is a process creating methane at the ethanol plants that can be done without having to build thousands of miles of pipeline, which from what I can understand, if the safety isn't there, then they shut it down after they've destroyed thousands of miles of farmland. So we need to check safety first. But I'm sorry, I got sidetracked there. Methane created at the ethanol plants would increase the fuel production of the plant by 66% out of the same amount of corn. Okay, so you don't need more corn to create the methane. And you don't need a pipeline to do it. It can be done right at the ethanol plant and shipped out on the same rails they ship out the ethanol. So we don't need to have eminent domain. We don't need to build a great big pipeline. And so, but for the most part, I agree with this project. I would, this ordinance. And I would request you to pass it. And I have time left.
I'm Steve Dollard. I live in Spirit Lake, just down the hill in the lowlands. And I don't have anything eloquent or whatever to say other than the fact that I oppose this pipeline and all pipelines like it. This county, that's needed to get that on the record in my voice. And that's that's it.
Thank you.
Al, that you don't know the last name, Geese. I'm Al Geese. Live in Spirit Lake, farm in O'Brien County, own an ag business in Dickinson County, and past president of Iowa Renewable Fuels Association. I'm not here today to necessarily lobby for or against anything, to vilify or applaud anyone. I'm here today to talk about, let's frame this thing from a global perspective. Carbon capture and sequestration is underway globally and domestically. We can either get on that train or we can watch the train leave the station. What's going to happen one way or the other? If we get on the train, we're likely going to build 50 new ethanol plants in the Midwest in the 200 million gallon size. We're going to build 30 approximately new ethanol to sustainable aviation fuel plants. We're going to build 5 or 6 oil to sustainable aviation plants. We can only do it with carbon capture and sequestration. That debate is over. It is going to happen. Where we're going from here depends on what we do in Iowa, depends on what we do to access our ability to capture carbon and sequester it. There are no other technologies viable at this point to do that other than the approach we're using. What's it mean to Iowa? It means we'll grow 20 million acres of corn that we won't grow without it. What does that mean to Iowa farmers over the next decade, phased in? $50,000 to $60,000 a year of income, either more or less. But staying the same is going backwards. We have to look at the global, from a global perspective, and be on board with the way we are moving globally and domestically. Iowa is an energy and food production powerhouse at this point. Used to just be food. Now we're food and energy. One of the things I hear constantly is, well, the ethanol doesn't change. What the heck is the point of doing this? The point of doing it is ethanol does change. You capture the carbon, you move to the massive sustainable aviation fuel market. You have to convert ethanol to SAF. That ethanol does and will change when you do that. Can't do it without it.
Want to go back to the nineties? Think about, most of us here can remember that, what that was like.
Sorry, sir.
If that's where you want to go, we got to stay
Sir,
where we're
your
at.
time is up. Thank you.
We have Steve Anderson next, and then we have Megan Sloma, Kayla Corcoran, and Laura Weaver.
Good morning, Steve Anderson from Milford. I'm just wanted to let you know that I am in favor of what you're doing here with the carbon pipeline scenario situation. I did have a question though, as I can only follow your meetings mostly by the minutes, and I'm trying to figure out when, reading through the minutes, I didn't know there was a public hearing until the agenda came out. So when did you actually set the public hearing for today?
Or
I went all the way back through December, all the way through to now, and I wanted this to happen, but I want it to be done right. So I didn't see where the supervisors have even talked about this public hearing or any of the public hearings. So, okay, well, it's not in the minutes, so. Okay. So I'm just asking because I want to make sure that this goes correctly and gets done right, so. Okay, all right, but I am in favor of this, so thank you.
who's next, Jordan?
Megan
Yes.
Sloma, and then Kayla Corcoran, and then Laura Weaver.
Well, thank you so much for spending time on this issue once again and for listening to the citizens. We greatly appreciate it. I am strongly in favor of this ordinance. It provides much needed protections should this pipeline be approved. I just had, I guess, a couple small comments that I'd like to make. I'd like to echo what Vicky said about not just saying Summit, but making sure that this would apply to other CO2 pipelines. Also looking on page, I want to say it was like 16 or 17, where it talks about what needs to be provided to first responders. That is a huge concern of mine, is making sure that first responders have the training and the equipment and everything else that they need. Should they have to, I guess, respond to a rupture of one of these pipelines. And in looking at, I guess it starts with item J, it talks about the information needed that must be provided to the county first responders. And it talks about both information that needs to be provided and items, like physical things that need to be provided. And so I think it might be good to put a little clarity in that section. I guess this is the information we're asking for, and then these are the actual tangible things that we're asking you to provide. I guess the question also is out there, you know, do counties have the authority to enact ordinances such as this? I guess I would answer with a resounding yes. Are there lawsuits working themselves through the court system about this? Yes, but there hasn't been a final decision. And I would point back to the PHMSA letter that PHMSA issued back on September 15th. I know that there's been some debate about this letter too, but there's a sentence that says the responsibility for siting new carbon dioxide pipelines rests largely with the individual states and counties through which the pipeline will operate and is governed by state and local law. So if we're looking at the role that the local law plays in this matter, and if we're looking at the role that state law plays in this matter, when it comes to the IUB, they're just going to decide whether or not to issue the permit, and if the route that the pipeline company is asking them to approve is appropriate. But they're not going to get down in the nitty gritty in terms of where the pipeline should be sited. The local government, they are who know their county best. They are who know the topography, their plans for growth in the future and things like that. So that's why they've been given the authority in terms of siting. And so I would say that, yes, it's definitely within your purview to enact ordinance like this, and I would urge you to do so. And thanks again for your attention on this matter.
Thank you.
Good morning, this is Kayla Corcoran. I'm Spirit Lake. Again, I want to thank you for taking the time, and I am very for this ordinance as it is a good starting point. The one thing I want to say is something here, safety, safety, safety. I'm a lucky landowner that has been able to voice my opinion, but have I seen any safety information from them? No. Have we seen the plume models? No, because that's all in confidential. The biggest thing is I hope that you guys act on this ordinance. It's a good starting point, and again, thank you for each of your time working on this.
Thank you.
Laura Weaver. Others have said far better than I could. It would have been perfect. You're fine.
That's it. Okay, board, let's be looking at Article 3 definitions and Article 4 districts. What are your thoughts?
I see no issue with either of those articles. I think all this pertains though to Article 36. I mean, that's really the nuts and bolts of what all this talks about, all these surrounding that. And it even says that in 2A, defined in Article 36. So I personally don't see anything wrong with Articles 3 or 4 as the additions are. But again, I think 36 is the one that we
Right.
need to go through with the nuts and bolts.
Okay, Jeff? Tim?
Yeah. Okay. I'm okay with Article 3.
All right. Do I hear a motion to adopt Article 3?
So moved.
Thank you, Kim.
Are you doing 3 and 4 separate?
Yes, we're going to
Okay.
be doing these separate.
No, I just had 3 and 4 together. So I just want to make
Yes,
sure that my
3 and
motions
4
are.
are together. Is that okay,
That's
Kim?
correct.
Okay.
I'll second.
Seconded by Jeff. Further discussion? Hearing none. Kim?
Aye.
Jeff?
Aye.
Tim? Steve?
Aye.
And Bill is aye. Okay, next, do you have anything to say about Article number 5? Conditional principal industrial uses.
We're just adding the text hazardous liquid pipelines.
Correct.
Mm-hmm.
I would make that motion to approve Article 5.
Thank you, Steve. Do I hear a second?
I'll second.
Okay, thank you. Further discussion? No? Okay, hearing none. Steve?
Aye.
Kim?
Aye.
Tim?
Aye.
Jeff?
Aye.
And Bill is aye. Okay, now the one that Kim's waiting for, Article 36.
What about 21? Oh, that's right. We can't do it. 36, pardon me. If you're open for discussion, I've just got a few things to go through,
Okay.
right? I'm not
that-
opposed to anything here, but I would like some clarification maybe. Because I'm wondering how, number 1 on the separation, I guess is where I'm at. separation requirements, number E. It starts out from city limits of an incorporated city not less than 2 miles for separation of a hazardous pipeline. Is not Superior closer than that to the ethanol plant?
Yes.
So what are we saying there? And again, I'm asking, I'm in favor of something. I'm just wondering to clarify, what are we saying there then?
Yeah,
I was gonna do this on the right. Yeah, I didn't hear what you said. You left out. I was busy.
Yeah, no, sorry. All I'm asking is, right, is the ethanol plant, as I understand it, is within 2 miles of Superior. And so obviously the hazardous pipeline is gonna be within that 2 miles as well. That's just a given, it sounds like to me. So are we defeating the purposes here of saying 2 miles within a city when the pipeline is already in there? And what distance could we use? I'm just asking how that works.
Obviously, if Green Plains is gonna be connected to this pipeline, they're gonna have to move the city or the ethanol plant. I mean, as I said,
But
it's
that's what I'm
impossible
asking.
to do this.
That's what I'm asking.
And in addition to, so since the hazardous liquid pipeline is now going to be a conditional principal use in the A1 agricultural district, we do have the avenue for the Board of Adjustment to grant a variance to the setbacks. So if you'd like the setbacks to be reduced, initially here in the ordinance, that is fine, but that is also an avenue for the pipeline company to seek as well.
Is it appropriate to ask a member for some information regarding this? I'd
Go
just
ahead.
like, is anybody here that can speak to how you would get CO2 from an ethanol plant to a distance that would comply with this? Is that possible, or what would you do? So.
So let me
hence the
let me
problem.
ask another question, just because I think it's important we go through this. How far is the ethanol plant from the city limits of Superior? How far?
Yeah.
I understand that. Any idea how many?
I guess the definition you'd want is how far is it from where the CO2 pipeline would begin?
Absolutely. I'm
Yes, is
just
what
trying
you're
to get an
looking for.
idea in my mind what we're looking at here.
I mean, is it a?
And I understand it
quarter
could be a
mile?
conditional use like Megan is saying, and maybe we set it at something and they have to go in front of the Board of Adjustment. I'm cool with that too. It's just something I think we should discuss, knowing we have the
Well,
ethanol plant.
But we're passing the buck onto the Board of Adjustment.
We are.
To make a decision that, not to dice words, but we essentially are gonna decide whether the ethanol plant continues to operate in Dickinson County or not. That's what
I'm
we're really
asking.
doing
That's what I'm
here.
asking.
We have to have a way to, in this ordinance, when we pass this, we have to have some cutout to get them to the CO2 pipeline, if we're gonna have a CO2 pipeline ordinance. In my opinion, how, are we just gonna? You guys can't speak to that? Do you have any input at all? I mean,
What the variance for, what Megan said.
I understand the variance, how it would work. But I also understand that it's not really a given for the ethanol plant to have any access to it, because the Board of Adjustment, for whatever reason, could decide not to. I mean, I'm not sure how to deal with it either. I'm totally at a loss for a solution.
Well, I'm in favor of ethanol. I'll make that statement right now, and I'm in favor of our farmer. I'm just trying to get in my mind how this all works. If we're gonna say 2 miles, they're within 2 miles, we're already saying no.
Yeah.
Right? And so I'm just asking for clarification of what to do with this.
I have a suggestion. In Superior, you could just start at the Superior plant right on Highway 9 and go south. And you would have to have a variance because the south side and the east side of Superior would be impacted. Bob Jones would be impacted, but it wouldn't be. Right now, it comes from the northeast, wraps around, goes around, and then comes from the west. So it's circling Superior and the ethanol plant. They could be more direct on how they leave the ethanol plant and come into it, or not come into it, because Minnesota has not filed an application to have a pipeline come into Iowa, Minnesota into Iowa. So they could just start in Superior and go south. But to me, Summit doesn't ever want to think of any other possibilities other than what they got in their mind. That would just be off the top solution. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. You know, when it comes to designing the pipeline and where it is, all of these setbacks, considerations, plume models, all that stuff, as many of you have seen, are taken into account in the design of where it has to start, where it has to connect to, and where it has to tie to. And the other thing too is when you put an ordinance like this, like you're saying, hey, we're gonna direct it, it has to go in this location too, aren't you enforcing that upon somebody else? And there's already many people that have already came forward and signed easements that are good with this pipeline, and now you're moving it possibly off of those properties to somebody else by making that type of location direction?
Well, a point that I normally wouldn't make this point, but because I particularly am involved very closely with that, you're not gonna get my money back, whether you go through there or not. I'm keeping that. You can send the route anywhere you want to. My attorneys guarantee me it doesn't make any difference. I'm keeping that. But I do think it's important that be known, that the deals are made, the money's gone. But that doesn't, I don't think that affects my decision here. I don't think I'm gonna discriminate against you at all here. What were you gonna say?
Well, I was just gonna say that, you know, we're actually adding something after the fact, you know, when all the ethanol plants were, you know, I'm looking at Emmitsburg, I've been to that ethanol plant, partly, you know, Superior, Fairmont, welcome up, you know, they build them close to a town for a, you know, for a reason.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and we'd be penalizing them after the fact if we put something like a 2-mile restriction in. Unless we, you know, that'd be okay if they were building a new ethanol plant. But to penalize them after the fact, that, you know, that's where they cited the plant where they thought it would work the best with the
Mm-hmm.
information they had at the time. You know, to force ordinances like that, you know, I almost think that should almost go to the cities, you know, whether the city wants it or not. You know, we keep talking about local government. You know, the cities were evidently okay with them being that close when the plants were built.
So you're kind of questioning, is a CO2 pipeline this close to your city more of a danger than, how many gallons of ethanol are on that plant at a time? What do you have, 50,000 gallons or 20? I mean,
yeah,
they've accepted a significant risk by allowing an ethanol plant there that railroads out a fair amount of product that's flammable and
yeah,
could be considered dangerous, and they run it right through their city. The risk there seem higher than a CO2 pipeline.
yeah.
But I'm not an explosives expert, but either way,
Yes, come on up.
I'm here pro temp for Jim Tyndall, our mayor from Superior, and couldn't be here today. I'm Mark Campbell, pro temp for Superior. We have talked about this in our council meetings, and we've had very few people come into our council meetings, but yet question us all individually on what we know so far. And
the residents in Superior, majority of them are not happy with where the line goes. Coming out, I don't know if it's an outgoing or incoming line, but Huey Thompson owns the field just north of me and my fence line. And on the other side of that is a gray water line that goes from the ethanol plant over the river. And that capture line goes just to the north of that. And those are about 30 feet north of my north fence line, which is 1,200 feet from my house on my property. So once people in town kind of figured out where it was going, then they're beginning to question it. And of course, they don't have all the information about the good parts of it, but the synopsis is that they're not really happy with where it's going from the ethanol plant, just in general conversation so far.
Now, do you know specifically where that line is? Is it 1,200 feet or is it from 1,200 feet within 2 miles? Do you know?
It's where it goes east. I don't know where it actually comes under the road at, but I would assume just north of the railroad tracks. It'd have to come north, it'd have to cross the tracks somewhere. And I don't know if that's on the west side of the 320th
Is that
Avenue.
right by where they store all the anhydrous tanks?
I don't know where it crosses there. That's why I say I wouldn't
But
expect
isn't
them.
there a huge parking of
Yep,
anhydrous
of
tanks
hydrate,
and
yep.
anhydrous filling tanks?
Yep. But where that carbon line crosses the railroad tracks, I don't know. You would think it would be away from that for sure. But right across the tracks, I can't tell you the distance going north on that 320th Avenue is the one that goes toward the cemetery there, Swan Lake Road. Where it starts to go east, I'm up in the northeast corner of Superior, and I'm on the last street. If you were to go past the water tower, the last turn that you can go west on, that's actually a street before it turns to gravel, I'm right there on that corner. So my property goes from that street 1,200 feet down over the hill to where that first curve is on the gravel if you were to go north.
Can we get him a map?
Go
Do
ahead.
you want me to get it? Can you? I'm sorry, I'm
No.
trying hard to follow you.
No, I know, and if you
I'm
don't
losing.
drive out there and hunt a lot, you probably don't know where we're at.
Well, this is pretty important. You know, nobody's
It-
more effective than Superior and Terrell on this whole issue.
It is, it runs right just on the north side of my fence line.
Is it-
Now
can
I
you-
gotta see where you're at here.
Can you, if you had the mouse, could you track your route that you're talking about?
Okay, so clear over to your right side. Yep, that street
Okay.
right there. Go up, nope. I know I don't know how to run a computer anyway, so I'm not much help. No, you're fine, right where you're at, but blow that whole thing up right there, where it says 1,600 or 16,000 right above that. Okay, right there, keep going up. Okay, back up just a little, right there. That street, if you turn right on that, don't go, right, go a little farther over, see a big white roof? Right there, that's my house. So I'm the last north street up there. And then if you go down, if you're going up on the map there, I guess, in your direction, there's a fence line out there, and it's probably off your, yeah, there you go, that fence line. Okay, on the other side of that fence by less than 20 feet is the gray water line coming from the ethanol plant that goes east to west. It goes over the Des Moines River. And just on the other side of that going north is where the proposed pipeline is going out of for that carbon line. So that would be
Is it to the fore or is it, how far north is it there from the fence line?
about 20 feet north of that or less is the steam line.
Yeah.
And then I would guess whatever the reasonable distance is from that steam line would be there, but it's not very far north of it, less than 100 feet, I'm pretty sure. And that goes straight east and west, and I don't know where I don't even know where the steam line turns and before it hits the river, where it goes after that, but that's actually in Huey Thompson's field. And that fence line, well, you can see where my roof line is down to the fence.
How far is it from his building to the fence there, Jordan? Can you measure that?
You want it from?
I suppose from there, I'm curious to know.
The survey I did when I built that, I can't tell you the complete distance, but the back of that building is 300 feet from the road on the north side of my building, and it's about 1,200 feet from the road on the survey. So I would be 900 feet from the fence line roughly.
Okay.
Plus the 20 foot and probably 50, 60 feet out from that would be where that line, the carbon line is. So that's all I got. If you have any other questions on
Anyone
that.
have questions?
Nothing?
No?
Okay.
Thank you.
I'm kind of hard of hearing.
Well, appreciate the input.
Yep.
Well, what are you thinking? One solution would be to grandfather the plant in, and they can bet on getting a variance. Then any future plants will have to be 2 miles. And it sounds like there may be future plants.
I guess the question I wanted to lead with, and I forgot, is do we have any jurisdiction to do this in your opinion? Yes. We do. Because within the county, can we enforce it?
People in this audience will say time will tell.
Okay.
Can I make another comment?
If she makes a comment, I'm going to do.
Okay, that's fine. But I will warn you, in 4 minutes, we have to start on wind turbines.
Well,
Yeah.
Mr.
Or, okay,
It'll be short.
24, sorry. Go ahead, Vicky.
Mr. Guy said after that there's going to be hundreds more ethanol plants going to be built. 100 more sequestering pipelines are going to be built. We need to stop somewhere and get a handle on it before those come too. It's just going to keep coming at us. And what's to say Superior's not going to build bigger and expand. And then that's more carbon in the area and more danger to the residents. We have to have some plans in place. There are so many plans that we don't even know about yet. The road crossing, the drainage districts, Summit's not paying their bills to counties that they've incurred. There's water, there's so many things we don't even know. We need to be protected, and then of a lot of things. And I do have kind of a map of Superior where where the pipeline is gonna be traveling. But we still need to look at this. We still have to start somewhere. We still need to protect our citizens. Thank you.
The last little thing I wanted to say is that Emmett County, passed an ordinance not that long ago and now has entered into an agreement, actually waiting for, it was nice that you just talked about, is are these going to be enforceable? And they have now tabled that, and actually waiting for the judgment from the appeals court. The reality of that means there's no rush in passing this either, because the reality is if the appeals court says what Judge Roach did, it's not enforceable. On the flip side to that, if she changes the ruling, we have to go back to the IUB. So that process starts all over again. So there is another option, tabling it until the appeals court rules. Thank you.
Want to comment on it?
No.
Okay.
It's fine. I know what that means.
I'll throw out a suggestion. It might be crazy. Again, this is a conversation, right? We have to talk and go somewhere. That's why I brought up the 2 miles. I'm concerned about the ethanol plant, okay? What if we went 1,600 feet And we're with a consistency there somewhat of what our other ordinances are with waivers, that you could waive that. Because I'm trying to think the distance that we're talking about. I mean, the gentleman showed 1,200 feet. That can be adjusted somewhat. And that's a starting point. I can be way off, or again, that's a starting point. I know we're using that 1,600 feet and other things. Your thoughts?
I think that's a starting point.
Would you be changing all of them then to 1,600 feet all the way down through?
Well, the only, and Kayla, is Kayla still here? Yeah. Okay, I've got a question for you, right? Because I know right now, I've heard many, many times, this pipeline's coming right on top of you. Okay? PHMSA right now says 50 foot. You gotta be 50 foot away from a dwelling, correct? Okay. Down here on number 4, we have from any occupied structure, a half a mile. Here's the challenge I have with a half a mile, right? These things are being challenged. And we've already said, we don't want eminent domain, we don't want these things, but we're seeing the United States and we're also seeing the state override us, right? So what I'm saying is something that might be more applicable is if we stayed consistent and said 1,600 feet from an occupied home. Would you be all right with that? No? No? Okay. I had to ask you. I had to ask you.
I have a map if you wish, that was prepared for the next public hearing for 1,600 feet from a human occupied dwelling. If you would like to see that.
Yeah, I'd like to see if it's possible to build a pipeline with 700 or 1,600.
Well, that's what I'm wondering too,
I
because
don't know if
otherwise
it's even-
we're gonna have.
I mean,
Jordan, go to zoning and planning and zoning file.
I'm concerned that effectively what we're doing is we're just trying to zone them out of the county. And I think a lot of people would support zoning them out of the county.
P and Z.
That's
I
not
get
really,
that. I get that.
that's
Yeah.
not really giving it a fair shake.
Bottom. Or I guess that's actually the top. But it is about balance. So go ahead and travel over to Superior area. You can use the zoom in option down in the corner, since it's a PDF, and then you'll just navigate along the bottom.
Well, you're not gonna.
This was created for other purposes that'll be discussed later in this meeting, but this will show you the human occupied structures with a 1,600 foot setback. And you can follow kind of Superior there and then down N14. And then something else that could be considered that we're considering in the other ordinances would be to include those waivers.
Okay.
So,
So if Kim's plan went through at 1,600 feet, if they could secure a waiver where needed on their own, then that's gonna be allowed.
then they would not need the Board of Adjustment. Well, they still would. Sorry, I digress. They would not need a variance from the Board of Adjustment. It would still be a conditional principal use in the agricultural district. So the project as a whole would still go to the Board of Adjustment, but they would not need to seek variances, which create.
For one thing, one of the things I've noticed is I don't think anybody really believes the impact of sequestering carbon would actually have on farm markets locally. I don't know if that's been conveyed very well here. To literally zone them out of the county could be a problem. Well, I'm not sure that we fully recognize or consider the impact that sequestering carbon is going to have on Dickinson County as far as the agricultural end of it is concerned. Was it Al? Did he go home? Is Al Geese still here? Did you hear what he said? I mean, do you think he's wrong? Do you think he's lying? What do you think? I mean, he's talking significant dollars that he said here at a meeting. That must be worth something. So when you say you can't even consider a compromise to 1,600 feet, that's a little concerning to me. That 1,600 feet sounds reasonable. The model that I saw looked pretty good to me. So I guess I liked what Kim was saying, going 1,600 feet is what I guess I'm trying to say. But what do you guys think?
$1,600's better than 50.
Well,
Well, that's my thought.
Kim's,
yeah,
That was my thought.
And I get a feeling no matter what we do, somebody higher up's gonna turn it all
Well,
over.
that's my concern, right?
I mean-
At least with this, we're trying to work with both sides, right? And as someone who does that, we have to work with both sides. So for me, that seems like a reasonable middle ground, and then we go from there with whatever we do, but I know 2 miles is basically, it's impossible for the plant over there. And the only other thing we could do is pass it off, like Steve made a great point. It's already there.
yeah,
We're trying to make law, it's something that's
Well,
already
that's why I
there.
said grandfathered in.
yeah.
Any other plants are 2 miles. So we could pass this as is.
But are we passing an ordinance that makes it impossible for Green Plains to connect to a pipeline that could save their lives in the future? It'll rest on the whims of a Board of Adjustment decision. Is that accurate? No?
But at least at this, with those proposed changes, it's not as extreme and it wouldn't effectively zone it out of the county. Like we said, you want balance and working with both sides.
Going to 1,600 feet, it wouldn't zone it out of the county.
Correct. You could see the map where the human occupied dwellings that were on there.
The 1,600 feet does look like it would be buildable, but still they're gonna have to get a variance
Or waivers. It
or
would,
waiver.
yeah, it would be more beneficial for the landowner to seek a waiver instead of a variance but if it's a non-participating landowner, then they would have to seek that variance.
Barb?
Why are we taking away the opportunity for Superior to protect itself here? I mean, this is the city of Superior. You're talking about putting this hazardous liquid pipeline close to it. Superior needs the opportunity to be able to protect its citizens if it's concerned about their citizens. Let's not take that ability away by putting smaller setbacks in. Then going from 2 miles to 1,600 feet sounds a little crazy to me. So let's give Superior an
And again,
opportunity.
For me, it's a suggestion that
Yeah.
the challenge that we have is the plant's already there. They've already okayed it to be there.
I
Now
understand,
this
but
is
when they
coming along,
did that,
We have to be very careful on both sides, because
Mhm.
the folks that elected me, I've got some that want it, some that don't.
yeah,
And I've got to try and come up with something that works for both rather than saying, you know what? We don't want this at all in this county. And that might be the feeling of some.
Yeah.
It's not of everybody.
well,
So
and
we have to find some medium that can work.
well, and I
if we
think
wanna Put it back on the city, we're more than happy can do that, but I'm just trying to get a talking point here.
Yeah.
Maybe 1,600 feet isn't what you all think,
Mhm.
but it's better than 50 feet that PHMSA is now enforcing.
Mhm.
That's all I'm saying.
The other thing though,
Kansas
to keep
isn't
in
done.
mind is it's hard for us to accept other people's facts and concerns. For instance, you're here lobbying that we're trying to kill Superior by allowing this 1,600 feet away. Minutes ago, you argued they should make methane gas, put it on a rail car and drive it through their town.
yeah, well,
Rail
there,
cars are way more dangerous than pipelines, like
I-
a zillion times more dangerous. So you see, it's hard for us to reach across the aisle. I do too. Think about what the other person's saying and then think about your proposals. What
Well-
if you won that? Do you think people would be happy with sending methane gas down a railroad car?
they're already doing it with ethanol. I mean, it's
You
already
wanna talk
happening with
about the
ethanol.
differences between liquid ethanol and methane gas? I mean, we have concerns on both sides of these.
I understand that, but Superior has needs the ability to make a decision here too. So,
I think the 1,600 feet gives them the opportunity, if they want it further away, if they want it closer, they can ask for a variance.
Mm-hmm. Or they can.
Okay, sir?
Good morning, Patrick Kelly, Okoboji. I like the ideas of some compromise. I hear a little bit more, now where it goes, I don't know, but I think that the spirit of compromise is what needs to be exercised here. Because I brought this up before. We don't need to have a continuing political fiasco in this county. And I just moved back here. But I think that's the last thing that the people of this county want. And I think that you've got some existing infrastructure, and I doubt if any of the plants are going to be pulled out any more than any of the pipelines are going to be jerked out. But it seems like maybe it might be appropriate to pump your brakes a little bit for maybe 60 or 90 days and develop a little more of the science on this, because I'm sure there's more information available on this, on whether the 1,600 feet is adequate, or you're going like say from 2 miles to 1,600 feet. That's a pretty drastic change. And I think there is an interest from some people, and particularly from the electeds, in reaching consensus and having a way forward that doesn't just lead to like people's reputations being dragged through the mud. That's not going to help anything, because all that's going to do is make more people reluctant to run for these positions, and that's a shame. You don't want that. So anyway, I just want to say I'm happy to hear that there is some suggestions of compromise, but I think it might make sense to slow the process down a little bit and see if there's more science available on this stuff. I'm not, although I studied engineering, I'm not adept, with the science on this stuff. And I don't think it's all completely established. But anyway, appreciate everybody's effort here. And I want to thank all the electeds, for stepping up and serving, because this is the heart of democracy. And it's important what you're doing. And I want to thank everybody else for coming and taking the time to be here. Have a good day.
Okay, thank you. One of the things that I've been thinking about this past week is natural gas lines. We all have them running into our house. How often have they blown up? I can think of one time in Dickinson County. That was over by Terrell, wasn't it?
Yep, right in our neighborhood.
That was a long time ago.
Well, yeah, I know it's a long time ago.
The only person.
So are we focusing on the danger?
Lower pressure. It's much lower pressure. These would operate at pressure approximately like hydraulics on a tractor, about 2,000 PSI, very high pressure. That's different.
Now, how long have carbon pipelines been running?
50 years.
And how many times have they failed? Sartasia, we know.
Yep. Can anybody else name another one?
How many of it ran for 2,000 miles?
It's just something to think about. That's all I'm saying. We have 7 minutes left. Does the board have anything else to say?
Okay, I'll just enter one more thing, being.
Come on up. Get close to the mic.
Beings that Navigator withdrew, and that was just announced last week that Summit has signed up all of Poets. Guess what? The 10-inch pipeline that goes through my farm, I'm quite sure will be a lot bigger, because the main line is supposed to be 24 inches down south of Highway 18. Well, they got to have more capacity, so I think our feeder lines are going to be bigger, because now they're going to add all the Poet lines. So it goes from 13 plants in Iowa to 25.
When it gets to my fence line, when it gets to your fence line and goes into my farm, they must make it back down to 10, because that's what my contract spells out, I believe.
What did your sign, what did yours pipe?
I thought it was 10. It's the maximum size.
Yeah, but
Poet does not affect people.
but
how
the
can
new,
they-
the new contract says up to 24 inches. You don't have, that's been our whole problem, the whole thing. We get no concrete information.
Now I
of what it's
wonder,
gonna be. So the last one I got for the eminent domain says up to 24 inches.
so how's that affect an existing contract, I wonder? That's another issue we'll talk about
Yeah.
later.
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
Mr. Chair, I would like to, I guess I'll make a motion, then it can die or do whatever. Number one, from city limits, as well as we're staying the same with number three for public park, occupied structure. All of those are a half a mile. I'd make a motion that we go a half a mile on those and the rest stay the same. Half a mile city. We got a half a mile on nursing facilities and all that already, half a mile on sensitive area, half a mile on occupied structure. Then the other two would stay at 1,000 feet
Do you offer waivers or is
with
that?
with waivers. I'll make that as a motion.
Okay, we've got a motion. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Jeff seconds. Further discussion?
I feel like we're rushing into this a little, even though we've had it on our plate a long time.
Well, I thought 1,600 feet was a compromise. Again, we're gonna be challenged with this. FIMS is 50 feet. We're gonna be challenged with this, and that's,
Yeah.
I just want something that is somewhat giving our landowners some leeway, but also that we're not trying to say, nope, we're not gonna do this. I think that might challenge it here already, but we're going against,
50 feet is too close.
it is, it's
Absolutely.
way too close. I agree, but that's where we are.
And procedurally, so since there are changes to this draft, there will be a second reading scheduled and an additional public hearing.
Correct.
Yep.
So this isn't the be all end all.
No.
This is what will be proposed.
Yeah,
And then
that's right.
also from someone who was spoke, I'd also like to change just I think it's Article K, emergency response and hazardous mitigation, number 2, where it did say lead, and I do believe it should say leak as well. So I
Correct.
would make that change. And then also to address another concern, it said, yes, animal husbandry facilities, the setback distance, as you can see, is 1,000 feet. But the application was asking for a map of all facilities within 2 miles. So it wasn't saying an additional setback. It was just asking for a map showing the facilities versus the 1,000 feet. I just wanted to clear that concern up as well.
I would add those to my motion.
Okay, got that, Jordan?
I'll talk to Megan. I got K too.
And the second would accept that.
And a second you accept? Is there any further discussion? Hearing none. Kim?
Aye.
Jeff?
Aye.
Tim?
I'm gonna go no.
No? Steve?
I'm gonna go no.
And, oh, good, 2-2.
Earn your money today.
Yeah, let's see, $1,000 divided by 365. I am like, as much as I'd like to get this off the table and out of our hair, I gotta say no. I'm like, we're just rushing it.
It's all good.
Just-
Yeah, it's
yeah.
all good.
Okay. So what would our next step be?
I would like to take another shot at this. I'd like to take a run at it. I'd like to find out what is buildable and what's not buildable. But I know right now I'm painted as this evil person that wants that CO2 pipelines, but I do not want her house 50 feet from a
No,
pipeline.
that's
And I
what-
need some sort of
that's why I'm trying to
guarantee for
help
that.
here.
That's absolutely ridiculous that that's in there and we've got to do something about it. So I think we need to come back and revisit this.
Okay.
Like, soon. I guess, if you- I think so. We need to
You would
think,
like to send it back to P and Z for some further consideration?
that's what I'd like to do. I'd like to
Okay.
consider it.
Go along with that.
And I would not be opposed to paying for an engineering firm to come in and do some actual plume modeling that's not confidential, that we can actually go through. Because there's people in this room that think you can live on a CO2 pipeline explosion, and the people that think you have to be 30 miles away. There's somewhere, the truth is in there somewhere.
Okay.
Good idea. Oh. You give me that look. Huh.
Do we need a motion to send it back to P and Z?
I'm not sure. Steve, do we need a motion to send it back to P and Z?
I would make that motion.
Do we need to add that we'll? I'm serious when I say I want to hire an engineering firm
Yeah.
to get some
I think-
facts,
I
an
think we should
outside.
send back to P and Z after we have some engineering done and flume modeling done.
So does that two motions or is that one motion? How do you do that? Because
You understand that by the time that all gets done, the IUB will have made their decision and this is all moot, right? I was saying that it's my understanding that if we go and wait for a study to be done, the IUB will have already made their decision and this is the moot point.
so you don't think our ordinance would be effective then?
I don't,
You think because it has to be in effect?
prior to what they're doing.
Well, I asked you why your face was crunched, but that's why.
Can I make a comment? I have a suggestion.
Do we need to follow the 10 o'clock time for the next public hearing?
Yes, we need to do that.
I have a suggestion for someone you could have as a resource. Dan Harvey from Gruber. He has done a lot of plume modeling. He could give you a lot of specifics on
Terrific.
how the plume modeling works and how he's done it. But Dan Harvey from Gruber. I can get a phone
Okay.
number if you need it.
Thank you for that information, Vicky. We
Well,
do
we'll
have a
just-
motion
just
on
send
the
it back to
board.
P and Z then? And-
No.
and
All right.
about modeling, yeah,
Or just send it back to P and Z?
yeah.
Okay, we've got a public meeting we should start, but we do have a motion on the floor, so we do need to vote on that. The motion was made by Kim.
No.
No, Steve. Who seconded that?
I started to, didn't I? Yeah, I'll second that.
Okay, Steve,
Aye.
Tim,
Aye.
Jeff,
Aye.
Kim,
No,
and Bill is aye. Well, it is now 10 o'clock and it's time to start a public meeting on wind turbines.